Oslo, Norway 3 years ago. Mom and I spent Christmas week in Bergen visiting her family and celebrating my 22nd birthday. We decided to leave Bergen 2 days early so that Dad wouldn't spend New Year's alone. During the week that we were away, Dad told us how much he missed him. We arrived home in the middle of the day, just as the sun was setting, and saw our Christmas star lit up in the window. As we entered the house, we heard Dad groaning upstairs, so we went up to see if he was okay. When we opened the bedroom door, we saw him with another woman. "What are you doing?" Mom screamed. Dad replied, "Lee, you came back early." "Who is this woman?" "She's just a girl for money. She means nothing to me." The woman exclaimed, "I'm not like that. I'm happily married." Mom shouted, "I see what makes you happy." Dad replied back, "I still love you. Lee, let me get rid of this bitch. She's only here because I was lonely. We can talk." Mom replied, "You can talk to my lawyers. We're done. How can I trust you again, you bastard? Do you understand what you did to our family?" Mom started sobbing and ran down the stairs. Dad looked at me and said, "Joran, none of this would have happened if your mother hadn't come home earlier and seen us." I looked at Dad. "You're wrong, Dad. It happened. Mom and I just wouldn't have known. You said you didn't want us to see you. It works both ways. I never want to talk to you or see you again." I ran downstairs to my mom, and with our suitcases still in the trunk, we went to see our friends. Minneapolis, Minnesota present. I pressed a button on my cell phone and hung up after speaking with Roger Mance, my longtime friend and lawyer. My 2 adult children wrote a few days ago that they wanted to visit me here at the nursing home. I haven't seen them since the funeral of my wife, Solveig, and that was 2 months ago. Their plan was for me to sign powers of attorney, giving them complete control over me and my affairs. But my plan was different, and now it's time to implement it. I realized 2 years ago, after a stroke, that Solveig would not be able to care for me at home. She tried her best, but was fighting her own battle with cancer and was undergoing intensive treatment, so I agreed to move into a nursing home. I wanted there to be a stroke recovery department, which would limit the choice of nursing homes. The only thing that made life here bearable was the faithful attendance of Solveig, who sometimes hid home cooked food for me from the head nurse and her staff. At Solveig's funeral, my children promised to visit me often, but as usual, they could not be relied upon for anything. Without my wife to check, my decent clothes never came back from the laundry, but excuses came back instead. I put on some old sweatpants and an old sweatshirt. This will do for now. I prepared myself for this day by walking the hallways of the nursing home, going to physical therapy, and getting by without the help of staff. I'm still not fully recovered, but like my clothes, this will do for now. I said goodbye to Alfred, my roommate. He nodded, wished me luck, and said that he would like to come with me too. I felt sorry for him. He was a great storyteller, but needed help walking and physically required the care they provided here. I walked down the hall to the nurse's desk and found Molly Turner, the rather rude head nurse, and her 2 assistants sitting behind her. "Good morning, Nurse Ratched," I said. "Good afternoon, Gunnar," she answered. "I'm checking out," I said. "Don't joke, Gunnar. No one ever leaves a nursing home unless they're on their back with a tag on their finger." I looked at her and smiled. "I only hope this will be your fate, Molly." "That's not a nice thing to say, Gunnar. Now go back to your room, or I'll have diet services take away your rice pudding for the week." The rice pudding here was a pale imitation of the Risk cream Solveig made every Christmas. "I won't get it this year." I showed Nurse Ratched one finger and then walked towards the exit. The creaking of chairs and shouts followed me, and I heard their footsteps approaching me. When I pushed open the 2 doors leading into the main foyer, Roger was standing there, next to the nursing home administrator. I walked up to my lawyer and shook his hand. "Thank you, old friend." I turned to see a shocked Nurse Ratched. "There is no need to return Mr. Larson to his room. she said quietly. The nursing home administrator said, "That won't be necessary. Molly, Mr. Larson is leaving us. He's not taking anything with him. You can clean out his room and prepare it for the next resident." I looked into Nurse Ratch's eyes and saw the flames of hell in them. Then it was my turn to smile back. Roger took me to my house. No one had bothered to clear the snow from the path, and I was worried about what my kids might have done inside. I found a hidden key that I had left under a stone many years ago and used it to enter through the front door. There was almost no furniture left in the living room and dining room, or, let's say, it was stolen. They opened a small office near the kitchen. Papers were scattered on the tables and the kitchen floor. I turned around and said, "Looks like you're going to have a tough job, Roger." "This is exactly what you predicted, Gunnar. Our firm will take care of it for you." I opened a small drawer in the office and, fortunately, found my passport intact. It was of no use to my children. I walked into the master bedroom and saw that the dresser drawers were partially open and clothes were strewn all over the floor. On top of the chest of drawers sat Solveig's jewelry box. I opened it, and there were few things left inside. I was delighted to see the gold charm bracelet I gave her for Christmas 35 years ago. She wore it a couple of times, then stopped, complaining that it turned her wrist green when the faux gold plating worn off. But she kept it all these years. This inexpensive souvenir was an old trinket to my children, but to me it is as valuable as the ring of Sauron's power. I took it and put it in my sweatpants pocket. I went into the closet and picked out a few things, put them in an old duffel bag and said, "I'm done. We can go." Roger said, "The locksmith and the security company will meet me here this afternoon. Once they're done, your kids won't be able to get in here anymore. I wouldn't want there to be an auction here. I don't think Solveig would like it. Once you've looked through the papers, just throw whatever's left in the dumpster and take it away. Whatever the two pirates took, that will be the only inheritance that they'll ever see from me." Roger and I then went to his office. I said hello to Jane, my longtime secretary. I've always suspected that Jane knows everything that goes on here and is secretly running the place, not unlike how Nurse Ratch does in her own sphere. However, Jane does this with greater efficiency, happiness, and joy for both clients and staff. Jane asked, "Can I help you with anything, Gunnar?" "I wouldn't mind a decent cup of coffee and an apple donut if you have one." "I'll bring them to Roger's office. 2 cream and no sugar, if I remember correctly." "Perfect as always, Jane." We went to Roger's luxurious office, and I sat down in a chair more comfortable than any I had sat in for the last 2 years. "Are you really going to do this?" asked Roger. "Yes, every little thing," I replied. I signed numerous documents excluding my 2 children as beneficiaries of my life insurance and investment accounts. I also gave Roger a limited power of attorney to sell my home and dispose of the property. Jane brought coffee and an apple donut. "Norway? Why would anyone go to Norway in December?" "Did Roger let it slip?" I asked. Jane replied, "Every paper that comes in here goes through my hands. I opened your visa when it arrived." "Jane, I can't spend Christmas here in Minnesota. The harsh winter weather is nothing compared to the coldness of the hearts of my own children. The farther I am from them, the better. I have never been to Norway and have always wanted to see the homeland of my ancestors." Like I said, Jane knows everything. The coffee was great, and the deep-fried apple donut was outstanding. Roger handed me a package marked Gunnar Norway. After Jane left, I opened it and looked at the contents. As planned, there was an international mobile phone with a different number, a wad of crowns, and 3 new credit cards in the name of a fictitious company. I handed Roger my old cell phone. "We'll dispose of this for you. Your children won't know where you are unless they hire an exceptionally well-connected private investigator. Legally, they have no rights to any of your assets, so even if somehow they'll track you to our legal office, they won't let Jane pass by." I trusted Roger on this. The tour operator you asked us to sign you up with looks pretty shady. Their contract looks like it was generated from a free legal website. We checked it. It's rough, but legal and binding. If you refuse, they'll still get paid. Why did you choose this travel agency? There are many larger and more reputable companies we could book you through. Stupid, Roger. I know it's a one-person company run by a young vlogger in Norway. The nursing home was incredibly boring, so I spent my evenings watching her videos of her traveling around Norway, visiting places and leading small groups of tourists. It seemed like people were having fun, and she made me laugh. Watching her videos was one of the few things that brought me joy. Why did you book for 4 people? Roger asked. I wanted to make sure the tour for Christmas in Norway doesn't get cancelled. She has a minimum of 4 people. You will not receive a refund for other participants, even if others join the tour. I don't need money, Roger, but I need this tour. What about clothes? You don't have a lot of clothes in your gym bag, Gunnar. Do you want to stop somewhere before you go to the airport? No, I'll travel light. It'll be easier when going through airport security. I'll buy more clothes when I get to Norway. And after returning, I'll go somewhere warm and sunny, maybe visit a mouse in Florida. I'll be in touch if I need anything in Norway and call you when I get back in 3 weeks. After 2 days. Yesterday, I spent the day buying new clothes that I will need. The tour included a mix of urban and outdoor activities, so I bought a basic wardrobe including good walking shoes, snow pants, a warm jacket, and gloves. I had lunch and dinner at 2 small restaurants. The food was good, but I felt lonely dining alone, in a city I didn't know, in a strange country. I really missed Solveig and wanted her to be here with me. The next morning, I headed to a nearby hotel, where the tour group would be meeting, and followed the Norway Christmas tour sign into a small room off the lobby. There she was, Joran, my vlogger. She was about my height when I could stand up straight, with long blonde hair parted down the middle, clear blue eyes, and her signature beaming smile. She was wearing a Norwegian Dale sweater and brown pants. Joran spoke to me in Norwegian. I'm sorry, sir. This room is reserved for a tour group. I got closer. Yes, and I'm one of the people on the tour. We have a pretty busy schedule for the next 7 days, December 15th to 22nd. Are you sure you're fit to do this tour? I wasn't sure, but I didn't want to tell her. I won't bother you, I replied. What is your name? She asked. Gunnar Larsen. She opened a small notebook and flipped through the pages. It says here that you are in a group of 4. I see 3 more names here. When will they arrive? There will be no others from my group. One of the names is my recently deceased wife. The other 2 are my estranged adult children. I am here alone. Joran looked puzzled. Only 4 people signed up, including you, all from your group. If the others don't show up, you'll be the only one in. I can't. I have reservations that I can't cancel. You'll cost me a pretty penny, even if I do the tour. I replied, the contract states that the minimum number of participants is 4 people. I will pay in full for all 4. You will not lose money. Joran chuckled and looked thoughtful. I don't know if you're some kind of perverted old man, but if I agree to continue this tour, you should know that we'll be sleeping in different rooms every night, and there won't be any sex. Judging by the way you look, I hope you thought, if only you could wipe your own butt. Your conditions are acceptable. I had a stroke 2 years ago, but I have mostly recovered. I can walk, talk, and listen. I sometimes have balance problems and sometimes stutter a little. If you think something will be too stressful for me, I'm ready to skip this part of the tour. Well, Mr. Larsen from Minnesota, you'll need to sign a few liability waivers. As stated in the contract, I'll be filming the tour group for my vlogs, so expect to see some smiles when I film you. In the meantime, go help yourself to breakfast. There's coffee, brunost, bread, and milk. Enough to feed 4. Don't expect me to serve you. And if you don't know how to use a cheese knife, learn quickly." Her expression changed from puzzled to confident, with which I spent virtual evenings. I was pleased that we agreed. Smiling won't be a problem. Joran left the room and soon returned with a small basket of food. "We have a lot of brunost left, so I'm going to make us a lunch bag called a mat pack. I know a place where we can sit and have lunch outdoors. We'll be using the Vi app and Oslo Pass for train and metro travel. But today, I'll mostly be walking around Oslo. You'll need to check into this hotel under your tour name if you haven't already. In your tour package, I've already paid for the room. I'll try to cancel or change some reservations. Meet me here in an hour." I went back to my hotel to pick up my things, then checked into the one Joran recommended. It wasn't as good as the one I left, but it was clean and I didn't want to resent it on the first day. I bought a surprising amount of clothes yesterday and had to make 2 flights to transport everything. I then returned to the meeting room and found Joran waiting for me. Joran and I walked from the hotel to Oslo Central and took the tram to the Vigeland Sculpture Park. Joran told me that this is the world's largest sculpture park created by one artist, Gustav Vigeland, with more than 200 sculptures combining the human form with an element of fantasy. Most of the figures were nude, mixing vagueness with highly visible detail. The most famous sculpture is a 17-meter monolith, consisting of 121 intertwined human figures striving for the top, carved from a single block of stone. We spent over an hour walking around the grounds, and although it was interesting, I told Joran that it didn't feel like Christmas here. A mix of walking and a short bus ride brought us to the Akershus fortress site. Built in the 13th century, it protects the waterfront and Oslo harbor. Also on the site was the restored Akershus Castle, which was previously the residence of Norway's past kings. Joran said it now serves as an entertainment and events center for the Norwegian government and is not open to the public in the run-up to Christmas. I found it difficult to walk around the fort area as there were steep inclines mixed with stone steps and paving stones. Remnants of the previous snowfall still lingered in shady areas and under arches, making passage treacherous. We stopped at several places where there were great views of the city of Oslo, the bay and the fjord, and there were still cannons on several bastions. Joran was acting rather businesslike and did not seem to be enjoying the walk. When we finished walking around the fort, it was almost lunchtime, so we sat down to eat our mat pack. After lunch, I learned that there are various museums in Akershus, although not all of them were open. We visited the Norwegian Resistance Museum, which tells the story of the German occupation of Norway during World War II. There were exhibits, dioramas, and original documents required by the Germans. I've always liked history and old war films, so I liked the museum. One of the consequences of my stroke is that I don't remember things as well. I was trying to remember the name of that Clint Eastwood movie where there was a lot of snow. Joran and I headed downtown and stopped at a pastry shop for Norwegian coffee and a slice of layer cake. Joran said we stopped here because we were having a late dinner tonight. She said that one of the owners is from Brazil and that there are many good international restaurants in Oslo. I ordered a piece of walnut and apricot pie, which was especially delicious. Joran ordered a chocolate pastiche, and while she ate it, she looked happier than at any other time of the day. We set off again, and I was surprised by the early onset of dusk. The street lights were already on, the Christmas decorations were glowing, and the buildings were illuminated. We walked past some buildings, including the Nobel Peace Center, which tells the story of Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, as well as the Nobel Peace Prize winners. Joran mentioned, "This building and Gustav Vigeland are connected. Vigeland designed the Nobel Peace Prize medal." I complained, "I still don't find these museums and buildings too Christmassy." Joran responded sharply, showing more passion and intensity than she had the entire previous day. "This is Oslo. This is Christmas. This is how Norwegians spend Christmas in Oslo. People come here from all over the world to see what I showed you. Vigeland Park receives over 1 million visitors every year. If you want more Christmas, you might like the ballet, The Nutcracker, tonight. You could hardly keep up with me today. Maybe the ballet will be faster than you. We walked up to the Oslo Opera House, located right by the water. It was a combination of very tall glass windows and white marble ramps leading from the roof to the water. Joran said that from the harbor, the building resembles an iceberg rising from the water. Since the show was going on, everything was brightly lit. We still had time before the ballet started, so Joran led me up one of the ramps. I was surprised that we were allowed to get up and go out onto the roof. The twilight views of Oslo and the harbor were even more impressive than those from Akershus. But the roof was not entirely smooth. In some areas there were cutouts in the white marble, unprotected descents into unmarked stairwells, and obstructions required by modern ventilation and lighting requirements. I tripped twice, earning an annoyed look from Joran. Walking inside, I saw the famous oval chandelier hanging over rows of red chairs. Sculptures were included in the decorations of the upper levels. As we took our seats, Joran said, "These performances of the Norwegian National Ballet's Nutcracker are always sold out. I like to include this ballet on my tours because there is no dialogue, which is convenient for tourists who do not speak Norwegian. You need to use your idea of what the characters are saying, or might say, and do it in the language of your choice." There were 3 empty seats next to us, probably prepaid as part of the tour. Otherwise, the hall was full. The performance was great, and I was immersed in the music and dancing. Solveig loved ballet, and thanks to her, I began to appreciate it. In the darkness, I imagined that I was sitting next to Solveig, so I put my hand on Joran's knee. Joran pulled her hand away from mine, but left my hand on her knee. After a moment, she squeezed my hand tightly, lifted it, and moved it back to my knee. I looked at Joran, and in the reflected light, I saw her giving me a look more fierce than that of the Mouse King from the ballet. At intermission, I apologized, explaining that my wife and I often went to the ballet and I got carried away. I'm not sure Joran accepted my apology. "If you touch me again without my permission, my knee will give you a little nutcracker," she said. The rest of the ballet was great, and I kept my hands to myself. As we were leaving the opera house, I felt hungry and asked Joran if we were going to have dinner somewhere. Joran led me across the street to what appeared to be a fancy burger restaurant, where we joined a short line waiting for a table. Looking around the burger restaurant, I said wryly, "Cheese sandwich for lunch and more fine Norwegian cuisine for dinner." "Mr. Larson, it's 8:30 p.m. Where do you suggest we go? People leaving the ballet are crowding the subway. There's a wonderful restaurant nearby with 3 Michelin stars, one of the best in the world. But the people who usually take part in my tours are much younger than you, and this is their food. A lot of them want vegan options, and they have them here," Joran explained. I saw the logic in her words and realized that I was an exception among other visitors. After we were seated, Joran suggested we try the marinated salmon burger with sweet potato fries. But looking at what others were eating, I chose a regular cheeseburger. Due to the way the tour was shaping up, I also wanted a beer, and the waiter recommended a local Pilsner. Joran sternly reminded me that the tour included food, but any alcohol would have to be paid for separately. The food arrived, and it was as good as any I remembered in the last 2 years. While the food was hot, the conversation between Joran and I became noticeably cooler. As we walked back to the hotel, the tension was palpable in the air. We parted for the night and Joran said, "You complained about the museums today. You complained about the food. The forecast calls for snow overnight. I will change the schedule for tomorrow. Come to the meeting hall tomorrow morning, dressed in your warmest outer clothing." As I went to bed in my room, my thoughts returned to the words of the Faith Hill song. "Where are you, Christmas? Why can't I find you?" I realized I made a fool of myself today. I was looking for Christmas, but it was all around me. Like the strong walls of Akershus, I closed myself off from him. I expected Norway to be a Christmas fairyland like a Disney movie, with talking snowmen, trolls, and fairy princesses. Like Will in the Doctor Seuss book. Christmas here is not a neon sign waiting to be opened, but all these wonderful people, proud of their country and traditions, smiling, wishing each other a year of Yule, and acting warm and friendly. They surrounded me all day, but I did not see them. I felt like the Grinch and promised myself to behave better tomorrow. My only regret is that the jacket I bought was bright green. I met Joran in the same hotel room. Breakfast today consisted of coffee and oatmeal with additives. We're going sledding this morning, that is, Gunnar. The name for sledding in our language is Kjelk. With the snowfall last night, the slope shouldn't be icy, and maybe if the sky clears a little, we'll get some good views from the top. Today will be colder than yesterday. I defended myself. We used to go to a cabin in northern Minnesota, near Grand Rapids, and go snowmobiling. The cold won't be a problem. I took a deep breath, then let it out. It looks like it's going to be another cold day, and it's not just about the temperature. Joran didn't believe in me. But sledding sounded like sledding, and since all you had to do was slide down a mountain on your butt, I had to deal with it. The only thing that bothered me was the hike back up the hill. I hoped he wouldn't be too cool. We rode the T-Bane to the bottom of the small mountain, then the metro to the top, where we each rented a wooden sled. The man who rented the sleds to us gave us instructions. The track is 2 kilometers long and drops more than 250 meters. Stunned, I involuntarily groaned. The man continued, "Even with the snow that fell last night, you may find ice patches in the center, so if you want to go slower, stay close to the edges. You can also brake with your hands. Control is with your feet and body tilt. That is, when you fall off the sled, look behind you to see if anyone is about to hit you. Then move to the side and keep your head up and watch for obstacles, especially other people, and especially when you get to the bottom. You can take your sleigh on the tube and go back to the top. Here are your helmets. Welcome to Corkscrew." Helmets. I quickly translated the metrics in my head. 2 kilometers is more than a mile, and the descent is more than 800 feet. This was not a children's slope. As Joran and I pulled our sleds to the starting position, the views were magnificent, just as she said. There was a beautiful vision of Oslo as the last of the dark clouds were leaving. The branches of pine and spruce trees were decorated with fresh snow, as if they had been sprinkled. I asked Joran, "Does corkscrew mean what I think it means?" She flirtatiously replied, "It means corkscrew. I hope you enjoy the sleigh ride more than visiting the museums yesterday." When we arrived at the starting point, we both got on our sleds. I was glad that there were only a few people here preparing to descend, but I sighed when I saw how young their faces were. I doubted that any of them were older than 30. I wondered if Joran was punishing me, or perhaps hoping that I would voluntarily withdraw from the tour. "I'm not sure I can do this, Joran. I'm afraid." Joran looked into my eyes with a grim expression on her face. "The fear is coming home with your mother and finding your father sleeping with another woman. Fear is watching how it destroys our family and wondering how my mother and I will live in the future. The fear is giving up a job with no prospects and trying to make a living as a vlogger in one of the most expensive countries on earth. The fear is checking your clicks, likes, and followers every morning and realizing that the numbers haven't changed. The fear is running a private tour company alone, navigating through the myriad of regulations, laws, and insurance requirements. The fear is the realization that I need to book at least 1 trip a month to cover these expenses. The fear was taking a group of 6 to Svalbard for a glacier hike in early summer and encountering a bear less than 200 meters away that was slowly moving in our direction. The fear is seeing our guide fire the last of his flares, but the bear is still coming. The fear is seeing the look in our guide's eyes when she pulls out her rifle. You don't have to be afraid of sledding, Gunnar. What you really have to fear is being too scared to try. I'll meet you at the bottom of the hill. Either drive the track or return your sled and take the metro." I watched as Joran pushed off and rolled down the slope, and then thought about her words. I lived the good life in Minnesota, meeting Solveig in college, and then immediately getting a job at 3M. The adventures involved trips to our lake cottage, where the only problems were mosquitoes and the problem of how to scrape burnt marshmallows off a stick. After the birth of our first child, Solveig and I stopped sledding and instead sat and watched our children have fun. What am I doing here in Norway? Why am I here? Joran answered this question for me. I pushed off and began my descent. I made my way down the mountain, and as I neared the end of the track, I was glad to see it leveling out. I saw Joran standing next to her sled, with a small camera pointed at me. I raised both arms above my head, waved them, then shouted, "I did it." I stopped 3 meters away from her. Joran ran up to me, and when I stood up, she hugged me. "I'm proud of you, Gunnar." As we hugged under clear blue skies and cold temperatures, I closed my eyes and went back 35 years to the little hill in Minneapolis, where I hugged Solveig after sledding. Joran let me go and stepped back. I exclaimed, "That was wonderful." I stayed close to the edge while others rushed past me. Some areas were uneven and my teeth were chattering. The only time I got scared was when there was a steep drop on one side. Isn't that true in Norway? Are they using safety barriers? You may have seen a few small concrete walls, but we believe in personal responsibility. If you can't control the sled, you shouldn't ride. The authorities monitor conditions and sometimes close the track when it gets too icy. So you believed in me? You believed that I could get down the mountain. You're okay, Gunnar. While I was waiting down here, I was reading about your Iron Range in Minnesota. You're rusty. There's a Wizard of Oz museum there. You're the Tin Man. This tour is an oil can. Figure it out. The oil can only work if you pick it up and use it. Stand up straight and walk tall while you can. If you fall, get up and keep going. It was an interesting way of looking at life. I was only 56 years old, but for the past few years I've been acting like I'm 80. I still have plenty of years left for sledding, as long as I'm not afraid to try. I turned to Joran. Let's go again. After 3 additional runs, Joran and I returned our sleds and had lunch at the beautiful Frognerseteren restaurant at the top of the hill. I took her advice and ordered thick pea soup with meatballs and potatoes. He was amazing. While we drank the hot chocolate, it was nice to feel alive again. A week ago, I was in a nursing home in Minnesota. After my wife died, no one visited me, not even my adult children. I was alone. It was a terrible place, run by a terrible nurse. I needed to leave. I made plans with my lawyer, walked out the front door, and got on a plane to Norway. What's the worst place you've ever visited? Dublin, Ireland. After a divorce, my mother and I found ourselves in financial difficulties. We went from a comfortable life to living paycheck to paycheck. I saw an advertisement on the internet for a job as a stunt double for the TV program Vikings. I wasn't sure what a stunt double did, but it paid well in a short time. I got naked while a dozen people were looking at me, taking photos and videos. I haven't gotten naked in front of a man in over a year since I got divorced. Roll, and they sent me to Dublin. The next morning I arrived at the studio, then to the makeup department, where I took off my robe while they applied fake tattoos and full makeup to make me look dirty in the right places. After lunch at the studio, the costume department dressed me in a white linen tunic. When it came time to shoot, they told me to stand in front of the main actor while he took off my tunic and threw it to the side. He was much older than me, and with his beard, he looked like my father. He radiated the same confidence as if the world revolved around him. I had to be completely naked in front of him and in front of the film crew who was filming me from behind. They told me to act submissive and let the main actor hug me. Take some adjustments before the director is happy. I was then ordered to lie down on a stylized Viking bed covered in furs. The sex scene was to be filmed twice, once for television, then for an unrated video release. In the first shot, I was naked, but the main actor remained clothed. He stood up and positioned himself between me with our feet. We had to make the audience believe that we were having sex without showing them anything. After several takes, the director was satisfied, and we moved on to the last scene in which I participated in this scene. The main actor had to lie on me, him, arms outstretched and resting on arms on either side of my body. This scene was more challenging because it had to be blended with previous facial shots of the lead actor and lead actress. The scene was shot from multiple angles, including an overhead shot, and below. While the director was reviewing the previous shots, the makeup artists were working on my face and hair. That was enough. I screamed that that was it, collected my things, and headed for the exit. I paid for my ticket back to Oslo and thought about filing a complaint, but later found out that most of what they were doing was legal. Most sex scenes are filmed between two stunt doubles. It's rare, but sometimes the lead actor will do these scenes if it's specified in his nudity contract. I began to think differently about stunt doubles, but my acting career only lasted one day, and looking at the final scenes after graduation, I was only on screen for 8 seconds, and no one knew it was me. I said, "Wow, we have a lot in common." The nursing home did everything by the book, but like you, I couldn't stand to be there anymore, so I walked out the door. "I'm sorry you had to go through such a terrible experience." Joran shook her head. "Don't regret it. The experience ended up changing my life for the better. When I returned to Oslo, I vowed never to work for anyone else again. I wanted to direct my own scenes, so I started making vlogs. That led to the creation of my travel company. As it turns out, I walked out of one door and into what I love. Plus, I walked out of there wearing this really cool leather Viking headband that I'm wearing right now. You're already halfway through. Front door. Now you need to find something or someone to love." A profound statement from such a young lady. I noticed that the sun was starting to set. Joran caught my eye and said, "Here in Oslo, the sun sets early, around 3:30 in the afternoon. In some northern cities, it started last month and will not appear until spring." I didn't want to spend the rest of the day looking at museums, and inspired by my success on the hill, I decided to take a chance. "Can you ride on skates?" Joran replied, "Yes, but not very well." I said, "If you know a skating rink with lights, maybe we could skate there." "There is a nice lighted skating rink in the center of Oslo called Spikersuppa," Joran said. "When the sun sets in Oslo, the twinkling lights come on, bringing their magic with them. The skating rink is located next to the Christmas market, which we will visit today." "Sounds great," I replied. We took the metro back to the center of Oslo and arrived there as the sun was setting. The sky was cloudless, but the layered horizon was still beautiful. Below it is orange, and above it there are increasingly darker shades of blue and purple, turning into a black night sky. After leaving the metro station, Joran and I walked along the pedestrian street, Karl Johan's Gate, past trendy shops and restaurants. Joran pointed out prominent buildings in the city center, such as the Royal Palace, Parliament, the National Theatre, the Grand Hotel, and the old buildings of the University of Oslo. We also passed the brightly lit Freya clock, associated with the famous Norwegian chocolate maker and unofficial symbol of Oslo. We rented skates and carefully stepped onto the ice. The skating rink was not very big and, fortunately, not crowded. In the middle, there was a frozen fountain. Christmas music was playing, and there were twinkling lights all around. I played hockey in Minnesota when I was in high school, but I haven't skated since. My father took me to figure skating lessons when I was little, but I quit. I kept falling while trying to do pirouettes. Maybe we can help each other. Have you ever tried ice dancing?" Joran laughed. "No, never." "And me too. But a wise woman once told me that I shouldn't be afraid of ice dancing. I have to worry about being too scared to try ice dancing." Joran smiled. "A truly wise woman. Let's try it and see what happens." I remember watching the great British duo Jane Torville and Christopher Dean at their last Olympics in 1994. The Olympics were here in Norway, in Lillehammer. I wasn't going to try to lift her or spin her, but I reached behind Joran with my right arm and placed my hand on her right thigh. Taking her left hand in mine, I held her left hand on my body. "Ready?" I asked. Joran nodded, and together we pushed off. Right, to the left, right, to the left. We moved slowly, side by side, in a steady rhythm, and only took a few staggers around the rink. After 3 extra laps, my ancient muscle memory kicked in, and I wanted more. We separated, and I linked my right hand with her left. This way we can take longer strides and roll a little faster. After another round, we added a slow zigzag pattern. Coming out of the last turn, I said to Joran, "Here's your chance to become a figure skater. I'll hold your hand. Try doing a spin." I accelerated ahead of Joran a little, then pulled her forward until she gained enough speed. I raised her hand in the air as she walked by, and she started spinning. She screamed, "I'm doing it." And she really did until she slowed down and fell on top of me. "Damn hook on the skate," she screamed. With her arms around me, our eyes met. She then wrinkled her nose, her signature expression in the video indicating that she didn't like something. But just as quickly, her face lit up and her big smile began to shine. I'm laughing too hard inside. It was so much fun. She burst out laughing, and I joined her. Finally, we broke the ice while on the ice. Joran stepped away from me and said, "It's time to go to the Christmas market." I helped her get up, and we handed over the skates. Lights and sounds nearby beckoned us. The sun had long since set, and now it was just a memory. It was completely dark, but the center of Oslo turned into a Christmas fairy tale. There were twinkling lights on almost every tree, and the large and majestic buildings around us were outlined with white lights to complement their dramatic lighting. Oslo was so different from Minneapolis. In downtown Minneapolis, 30-year-old buildings were being demolished to replace them with taller ones. Here the buildings were massive, centuries old, took up an entire block, and were still in use, allowing everyone to enjoy the history and architecture. Joran and I had seen glass-clad buildings in Oslo, with their clean, modern architecture, but this was the heart of the city. The life, pulse, and vitality of Oslo came from here. Towering above everything in the Christmas market was a brightly lit Ferris wheel, each spoke outlined in white lights. I looked at Joran, and she nodded. She took my hand, and we ran towards the Ferris wheel, skillfully dodging the increasing number of people. When we sat down, we discovered that each seat was enclosed in a glass bubble, perhaps as a safety measure, or more likely to keep out the cold. One of the benefits of this was that we could move around a bit, giving us a panoramic view of the center of Oslo. We stopped at the very top, where Joran took out her camera. Joran said, "It's quite romantic here. Let's take a selfie." She sat down next to me. "Kiss me." On the lips. "Just fast. I have a timer for 3 seconds. We will touch our lips and hold them together for a few seconds until the flash goes off." "Joran, I am much older than you. I don't think it will look very romantic." "Gunnar, you're not too old to kiss someone, and if necessary, I can do a little digital editing or just do a quick edit. It will be perfect." "How do you want me to kiss you? With open or closed eyes? Should I look at the camera or—" Joran quickly pulled my head towards her. When our lips touched, I closed my eyes and my lips responded to her touch. I felt her softness and light touch as Joran's tongue lightly touched my lips. The flash went off, but Joran didn't pull away, and neither did I. I opened my eyes and saw that Joran's eyes were closed. When our lips pressed together, it was so warm and cozy. We pulled away and Joran said, "Perfect." She then looked at the photo she had just taken. I wondered about the sequence of her words and actions. Joran switched to video and began recording her vlog. She spoke English. Immersed in Norwegian for 3 days, it almost sounded like a foreign language to me. When Joran finished, I asked her why she doesn't record her vlogs in Norwegian. She surprised me by continuing in English. "Norwegians already live here, who will be interested in my videos if I record them in Norwegian. If anyone in Norway wants to see the view from the top of this Ferris wheel, they will come here and take a ride themselves. People from all over the world watch my videos and speak at least a little English. I used to be bothered by comments on my videos complaining about my Norwegian accent. Now I just laugh about it. I asked her, from all continents, including Antarctica? Yes. The Norwegian Polar Institute has a year-round research station in Antarctica called Troll. Their mission is to study the polar regions and the effects of global warming and pollution. It's not a tourist destination, but they talked to me about the possibility of going there. They want to conduct more educational events to reach youth audiences on social media. I have subscribers there, but we have not yet been able to agree on permissions and details. The only time I would go there is in the spring or fall when they send a jumbo jet from Oslo to Cape Town and then to Troll to drop off or pick up summer explorers. Even then, the stay may only be for a few hours. After we left the Ferris wheel, Joran and I walked past small snow sculptures and then entered the wooden stalls set up for the Yule and Winterland Christmas market. Above us, lights twinkled on every tree. We walked past stalls selling various types of food, including international treats. I wanted something Norwegian for dinner, so Joran took me to a stand that sold moose burgers. We each took one, then sat on a bench to eat. While we ate, we were entertained by a talking moose head attached to the top of the food kiosk. The moose sometimes scared passers-by, told jokes about moose or sang songs. It began to snow, and as I looked up, snowflakes seemed to appear out of nowhere, as if by magic, and became brightly lit as they were caught in the light. When we finished, we continued to stroll through the market, passing shops that sold woolen goods, souvenirs, gifts, cheeses, and crafts. We walked past a kiosk offering samples of aquavit. I tried a popular brand called Line in Minnesota, but was surprised by the variety available at this one kiosk. A man and woman were talking to the clerk behind the counter. He kept shaking his head and saying in Norwegian, "Sorry, I don't understand. I do not speak German." In response, the man and woman spoke louder, as if that would help the poor man understand. Joran led me to a kiosk and said, "Guten Abend." She continued speaking in German, and I watched in amazement as smiles appeared on the faces of the Germans. When she translated, I could listen to the Norwegian part of the conversation between the three of us. I was surprised to learn that aquavit is as popular in northern Germany as it is in Scandinavia. The conversation continued. They described various aquavits. Then the Germans tried them. Joran continued to talk to them and sometimes turned around and pointed in different directions. The meeting ended amicably, and I walked over and stood next to Joran. "I didn't know you spoke German," I said. "I have a lot of tourists from different countries. I can speak 10 languages, some better, some worse. I don't expect tourists to learn Norwegian in a week. I need to know enough of their language to tell them not to pet polar bears." In any case, I answered questions from German tourists. They were really nice, and as a token of gratitude for my help, they paid for us to taste 3 types of aquavit. "I know which ones I want to try. Choose 3 for yourself, Gunnar." It only took me a minute to decide which aquavit to try. While Joran and I drank small samples, we watched each other, gauging the reaction. Perhaps it was the aquavit, perhaps the festive atmosphere of the Christmas market, or simply the wonderful day spent together. But Joran looked more beautiful than ever under the twinkling lights. Relaxed now, her remarkable features softened. Her pure blue eyes sparkled as they reflected the flickering lights, and the chill of the night air caused a natural flush to appear in her cheeks. I watched her tongue run across her lips, searching for the last coating of aquavit, and I wanted to kiss her. But I froze. Suddenly, I was afraid of opening the wrong door with Joran and losing something good as soon as it appeared on the horizon. I saw a shop selling freshly roasted almonds and ordered them in English. I brought them to my nose, took a deep breath, tasted a little, and handed the bag to Joran. "Smell it," I told her. "At night, I believe your other senses are heightened as your body compensates for the darkness." Stopping at a shop that sold glurg, I decided to grab some mulled wine. The wine had to go well with nuts. Joran refused. As we continued walking, I was surprised when Joran took my hand. It was nice, and I didn't mind. Joran turned to me. It feels like being here just with you, Gunnar, instead of leading a small group. Takes me back to happy memories of strolling through the Christmas market. Joran then kissed me on the cheek. Joran still spoke English, so I asked her about it. Still in English, I record my vlogs in English, read and respond to comments in English, so I need to practice. I also write tour descriptions myself. There are a lot of private guides on the internet, and I need to stand out among them. Another way to practice English is to write erotic stories and poems. It's a different kind of writing, and I like it because I can use a lot of adjectives. This was starting to sound interesting. So adjectives are the key. Adjectives are only one part. Let me show you. For example, I could write, "She kissed a man." Joran cupped my right cheek with her hand. Holding my face still, she leaned towards me and quickly kissed me on the lips. "How was it?" she asked. "Simple, but nice," I replied. As I tried to catch my breath, I doubted her sincerity and thought that perhaps there was another, perhaps much more interesting, reason. I sometimes write poetry too and understand the need to seek inspiration. You're breathing heavily. Gunnar, maybe we should take you back to your hotel. I think I'll call my story A Christmas Tour of Norway. I want to write about the Christmas market scene while it's still fresh in my mind. The walk back to the hotel was much warmer, and after we said goodbye, I realized that this had been one of the best days of my life, in many ways. I lay in bed, thinking about the scenes with the stunt doubles that Joran had described. She thought about all the women who would happily take her place under a handsome, mature actor. But this was a woman's view of the world. I thought of Joran lying in the dim room, the flickering oil lamps, the blazing fire, on a bed covered in Viking furs. I thought about all the mature men who would happily trade places with a male actor just to be with this beautiful Viking goddess. I also thought about the number of adjectives needed to write that scene. There was a week before Christmas when nothing moved in my room except my mind, filled with hopes that tomorrow would soon come. Snuggled up in bed, I dreamed of adjectives dancing in my head. 5 days later, Joran said, "Well, Gunnar, we have returned to our starting point, and this concludes our tour. The first day was not easy, but since then I have enjoyed spending time with you. After my mom's divorce, I stopped dating. Of course, I went out in mixed groups with friends, but I can't remember the last time I was somewhere alone with a man. Divorce made me lose all confidence and trust in men. Why enter into a relationship and give your heart to a man, knowing that it is doomed to failure? My father hurt me and my mother so badly that we both never recovered. But you have been so wonderful to me this week and have shown me that not all men are like my father." Joran looked at me with a pleading look in her eyes. "I don't want this tour to end. I do not want you to leave. Can you stay in Oslo for at least a few days?" Joran didn't want me to leave, and I didn't want to leave either. I replied, "Joran, I can't imagine being anywhere else or with anyone other than here in Oslo with you." Joran said, "It's still early enough that we can find a place without a reservation. I know a great place for a seafood dinner." "Lead me," I replied. Joran and I discussed the tour we had just completed while we enjoyed a delicious dinner in a cozy cafe. I suggested a few ideas for the tour, but mostly made it clear that I enjoyed seeing Norway, and I told her she was a great guide. After returning to America, I promised to recommend her tours to everyone I know. As I was looking over the dessert menu, I asked Joran, "I'm willing to stay a few more days. Are there any other Norwegian Christmas traditions or events worth attending in the coming days?" If you put that dessert menu aside, there's this tradition called the Sivslagskaker. I baked 7 types of cookies to celebrate Yule. If you come to my house, we can have coffee and you can try all 7 types. "Sounds great," I replied. Joran invited me to her home. She was beautiful and funny, and I admit that I developed fantasies about her from watching her vlogs at the nursing home. Hell, I've even created new fantasies in the last week. She became much warmer towards me at the end of the tour. In Tromsø, we shared a blanket while riding in a sleigh pulled by a real reindeer. But after the Nutcracker ballet, I restrained myself and did not cross the boundaries. Could a 56-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman have sexual relations? I had been coping with Joran all week and saw no reason why this couldn't be the case. We headed to the station and went to the area where Joran lived. Walking past the houses, I noticed a lit star in one of the windows. "What kind of stars are these?" I asked. "This is a tradition in Norway. The star is lit on the first Sunday of Advent to help guide the three wise men." We stopped in front of a modest house. There was no star in the window, but sheaves of oats were hanging from one of the trees. I knew about the tradition of leaving something for the birds on cold December days. When we entered, I was suddenly surprised. "Hi, Mom. I'd like to introduce you to Gunnar Larsen." "Good evening, Mr. Larsen. Joran has been texting me all week about your exciting travels. Hope you enjoyed the tour. My name is Lee." This was not what I expected. I was hoping to be alone with Joran. The family resemblance was obvious and striking. Leia's straight hair was slightly shorter than Joran's, but it was the same pure blonde shade. Her blue eyes stood out on her attractive face. She was wearing a multicolored Norwegian doll sweater and green trousers. I had absolutely no experience in determining the age of Norwegian women. She must have been in her 40s, but she looked younger. I said, "I really enjoyed the tour with Joran. Your daughter is very talented in many ways. Please call me Gunnar." Joran said, "Gunnar asked about other Christmas traditions and events in Norway. I thought Siv Slagskaker would be a good idea, and your cookies are the best in Oslo. I'll make us some coffee." Lee looked at me. "Please sit down. Gunnar, how long will you be in Norway?" I replied, "About 2 more weeks. I would like to celebrate the new year here before returning to America." I mentioned the completed tour, and she seemed interested enough for me to continue. I really enjoyed my visit to Lillehammer. It reminded me of the 1994 Winter Olympics, perhaps my favorite. The music was fantastic, and the woman who sang the Olympic anthem at the opening ceremony had a wonderful voice. Lee replied, "Her name is Sissel Kiokibo. She is still very popular, and we consider her a national treasure. I was 18 and working at those Olympics." "I'd like to hear more about this," I said. It was nice to see that many of the facilities were still in use. I also liked the Olympic Museum in Mayhagen, which tells the story of the 1994 Olympic Games. I was surprised to learn that Norway has won more Olympic medals than any other country. But the highlight for me was taking the cable car to the top of the Lisgardsbakken ski jump. The views were amazing. I can't imagine how anyone could be brave enough to take that leap. "Agree with you," Lee laughed. I continued. "We also flew to Tromsø, and I got to see the northern lights. It can sometimes be seen in southern Minnesota, but here, with the clear Norwegian air, it was much more impressive. Joran and I rode on a sleigh pulled by real reindeer. The deer turned out to be much larger than I thought. We visited a Sami farm where we ate reindeer meat and learned about Sami culture." "I've never been there, but I heard it's a lot of fun," Lee replied. Biram's work was also one of the highlights. You probably know that the city dates back to the 1600s. I really liked the old buildings and cobblestone streets. Although the Christmas market was small, it was unique with its artisans selling handcrafts. It was nice to see old crafts like glassblowing, blacksmithing, and woodworking. Joran returned with a large tray of coffee and cookies, and we began the tasting. Lee asked, "Did you take Gunnar to Peppercakebean in Bergen? This is a wonderful village of gingerbread houses in my hometown. There are over 200 little gingerbread houses, and when the little lights are on, they look so realistic." Joran replied, The week flies by quickly, Mom. There is never enough time. Gingerbread houses are so cute, and I have a lot of fond memories of going there with you. As we continued talking and eating cookies, I examined the decorations. There were advent calendars, wreaths, angels, gnomes called nis, hearts, stars, and candles. The jewelry seemed more natural, perhaps less commercialized, than in America. There was a real tree, decorated with a star on the top, garlands, tinsel, ornaments, and white lights. I looked at Lou. I noticed that you don't have a Christmas star in the window like many other houses. Lee replied, I found my ex-husband in bed with another woman. I immediately filed for divorce. Among the many things he took from Joran and me was our Christmas star. Lee sounded very hurt, and it wasn't just about the lost star. After we tried the last of the 7 cookies, Lee asked how I liked them. The crumb-cracker wafer cookies are probably my favorite. We tried making these in Minnesota, but yours turned out much better. And of course, the peppercucker star cookies were amazing. I held up the other cookie and said, I don't know what it's called, but it was great too. Lee replied, This is serenakaker, a Norwegian butter cookie. I realized the inevitable. It's getting late. Thank you both, Lee and Joran, for a wonderful evening. I need to go back to my hotel and think about what to do in the next few days. I saw Joran look at her mother, who nodded. When I stood up, Lee stood up too. Nonsense, Gunnar. I won't allow this to happen. Come spend Christmas with Joran and me. Almost everything in Oslo closes on the afternoon of Christmas Eve and remains closed until the 27th. Neither restaurants nor shops will be open. I have a spare bedroom upstairs. Come celebrate Yule with us. I picked up a signal between mother and daughter and wondered if this had been planned in advance. But spending Christmas alone in my hotel sounded almost as bad as spending it alone in a nursing home. It was an easy decision. I agree. Lee said, Okay, I'll come to your hotel tomorrow and help you move your things. Maybe we will also have lunch at one of the restaurants on Karl Johan's Gate. It will be my pleasure, I replied. Let's make an appointment for 11 a.m. December 23rd, known in Norway as Lille Julaften. Staying with Lee and Joran over Christmas created a problem for me. I needed to find at least one Christmas gift for each of them, in case they bought me a gift too. I got up early and went in search. Reflecting on last night, and in fact, the last week, it turned out to be much easier than I feared. I soon found a gift for each of them, as well as reusable fabric gift bags in Christmas colors. I heard a knock on my hotel door and opened it. Lee stood there, holding her coat on her arm. She was dressed in a traditional Norwegian folk costume called a bunad. Her blonde hair was simply styled with 2 attractive braids. I smiled and said, What a pleasant surprise. You look like you just stepped out of a fairy tale. She looked past me into the chaotic room, then took a step towards me and suddenly kissed me on the cheek. She stepped back and started laughing. Did not work. I'm a princess from a fairy tale, and you're still a frog. Looks like we have a bit of work to do cleaning up your lily. When Lee entered the room, I said, I already packed a small bag, enough for a few days. Lee walked over to the pile of clothes from my week-long trip. She picked up the shirt and sniffed it, then pulled a wool sweater from the pile. Keep your wool sweaters away from the rest of your dirty clothes. Wool is more difficult to wash and can absorb odors. Let's see what else you packed. Lee dumped the contents of my small duffel bag onto the bed and then began tossing things aside. This won't be enough. We need to take all your clothes home and wash them. Background memories returned. Every time we went on a trip, Solveig always emptied my suitcase and repacked it with other things. Solveig also always picked out my clothes when we were getting dressed to go to a wedding or party. Lee said, Don't expect me to do your laundry for you. I have other things to do to prepare for Christmas. You will have enough free time to do your own laundry. We will pack all our things when we return after lunch. What a woman! I can see where Joran has such a strong character. We left my hotel and Lee took me to one of her favorite cafes. Along the way, Leia's kaftan attracted glances and smiles, as if she were a magnet. While we waited for our food, I asked Lou about her bunad. Lee replied, "I don't wear my bunad very often. I usually wear it to National Day in May and to weddings and christenings, but I haven't been to many of those events lately. Christmas is also a good time to wear it." Lee wore a traditional white blouse with a silver pin at the neck. Her vest was bright red with hand embroidery on the chest. The blue skirt was decorated with intricate embroidery and was covered in front by a white apron. A decorative hand belt ran around the waist and along the front. "This is a beautiful silver brooch you are wearing. She looks very old." It was my grandmother's brooch. Norwegians have a spiritual connection with silver, and silver brooches are passed down from generation to generation. One day she will become Joran. The food was great. I haven't eaten bad food in Norway. Lee was a great conversationalist and generous with her humor and wit. Her stories about the 1994 Olympics were fascinating, and even though Joran and I had just been there, I wanted to go back. I found out that Lee works as a radiologist at a local hospital here in Oslo and took the entire holiday off. Lunch ended too quickly, and we returned to my hotel. As we were collecting my assorted clothes, I saw one of my socks on the floor, so I walked around Lou to pick it up. Turning around quickly, I found myself face to face with her. We looked at each other for a moment, then moved at the same time. Our lips touched, and it was not a gentle kiss, but a passionate, long and deep one. The intentions were clear on both sides. We parted. Lee said, "I haven't had sex since I divorced my husband almost 3 years ago. That scoundrel took away not only my Christmas star, he also took away my trust in men. I am 47 years old. I never go on dates because I'm afraid to open my heart to another man again. Joran has been texting me every evening for the past week and sending me short videos that she took throughout the day. She kept saying how much fun she had with you and what a good person you were. You know, it sounds funny, but after I watched and read what Joran sent, it seemed to me that I already knew you, and we passed the stage of the first date. I know you lost the woman you loved. I can't replace her in your heart, but if you're ready, I'd like to share mine." It was unexpected. When I was in Minnesota, I watched Joran's vlog almost every night. She's so sweet and funny, and she does a great job. Although I had never met Joran, I felt like I knew her. To use your dating analogy, that's one of the reasons I chose her as a guide. I felt comfortable with Joran and was too afraid to trust another tour company. When I came to Norway, I left my past behind. It's time to find something or someone to love. Our bodies merged again and our lips connected again. All fears of rejection disappeared when I pressed my lips to the lips of this beautiful Norwegian woman. Our tongues danced with each other while our hands moved quickly over each other's bodies. "Help me take off my bunad," Lee asked. Together we unbuttoned, unzipped, and untied, removing one layer after another of the complex bunad and carefully folding it onto the chair. It was like slowly unwrapping the best Christmas present I had ever received as more of Leia's body was gradually revealed to me. Her breasts were small but firm, which went well with her slender figure. I had forgotten how delicate a woman's features could be, and Leia's body was perfect in every way. I can't find any other words. You are truly magnificent, Lee. Lee stood up and took my hand. We went to bed, and she satisfied me. I was awakened by the closing of my bedroom door. I heard a quiet shhh. I listened in complete darkness to the steps and heard someone approaching my bed. Lee had to be ready to continue what we started at the hotel. I didn't notice any difference between Leia's and Joran's tall, slender bodies. Even if they were, it would be impossible to distinguish them in the darkness, especially given my short acquaintance with Leia. "I can't do this to you, Joran. I want to make love to you tonight, Gunnar, more than anything in the world. Don't you like me? Hasn't it been long enough since your wife's funeral? You're the only man in the world I can love without fear of getting hurt. Joran, you are an incredibly beautiful woman. For months I have fantasized about holding you in my arms, kissing you and dreaming of being exactly where I am now. But yesterday I met your mother. Joran asked, "Did she order you not to have sex with me?" I replied, "That's not the point. I think I'm falling in love with Lee. We spent a wonderful day together, and she won my heart. If this love turns out to be mutual, I am ready to give her my heart completely and never betray her. The reason we got to this night is because in the dark I thought you were Leia. Otherwise, I would never have done this." Joran changed position and lay down next to me in the bed. In the darkness, Joran said in a whisper, "You are so different from my father. He always put himself first. I was ready to give myself to you tonight. You could have remained silent and let it happen, then lie about it to my mother in the morning. But you didn't. You are a better man than my father ever was, and I know you will make my mother happy. Please don't be afraid to give her and yourself a chance. She really needs someone like you in her life." I heard a quiet sob and reached out to touch Joran's face. She cried. Joran came to my bedroom last night looking for someone to love her. She didn't know about my relationship with Lee or what happened between us at the hotel. I highly doubt her mother would have told her about this. I admire what Joran has done. She sacrifices her chance at love so her mother can have a chance. There was silence before Joran finally said, "What you have shown me, Gunnar, is that there are still good men left in this world, but I am still afraid to look for them." I remembered the day Joran and I went sledding. "Remember what you told me on Korkatrekkeran. You don't have to be afraid to look for a man, Joran. You have to be afraid of being too scared to try to look. Promise me that you'll push off like a sled and start looking. When you get to the end of this terrible mountain, you will no longer be afraid, and there will be someone you love there." "I promise, Gunnar, and thank you." Joran left my bed and closed the door behind her. I woke up in the guest room. Hearing noises in the kitchen, I got dressed and went downstairs. Lee smiled and said, "You'll," then made me scrambled eggs and smoked salmon. Afterwards, I enjoyed a slice of Christmas fruitcake with coffee. "Lee, I need to tell you something. Joran came to my room last night looking for a man to love. In the dark, I thought it was you. It took me a minute to realize that it was Joran, and I stopped before we went too far. Joran and I talked, and I confessed my love for you to her. She understood and asked me to give this love a chance. I asked Joran not to be afraid to look for love anymore, and she agreed. Thank you for telling me, Gunnar. I had a hard time getting Joran to date after her father hurt her so much. You have to be a special person to win a place in her heart. I trust Joran, and now you too. Just so you know, I will come to you tonight with a lit candle." I said, "That sounds romantic." Lee replied, "Wait until you see what I'm going to wear." Later at breakfast, Joran announced that she would be working on editing and dubbing her latest videos. Since they were Christmas-related, she wanted to finish them so she could post them later that evening. Before dinner, Lee led me back to the TV, and we snuggled up on the sofa as she turned on Three Nights Until Cinderella, a Czech reinterpretation of the Cinderella tale dubbed in Norwegian. The story was familiar, but the dialogue didn't match the actors' lips, so I had to focus on what they were saying. Lee mentioned that the show was so popular in Norway that one day there was a storm of protests when they decided not to show it. In the end, it was shown later during the holidays. Joran joined us for lunch. We ate rice porridge cooked with milk, sugar, and vanilla. Everyone had their own plate, and almonds were hidden in one of them. I suspected that they might have rigged it so that the almonds would go to me, but it turned out that the lucky plate went to Joran. As a prize, Lee gave Joran a chocolate figurine of a marzipan pig, which was quite strange, but it is part of the tradition. Lee said to use the leftover porridge to make riskrem, a delicious rice dessert that is eaten after dinner that evening. Riskrem solveig was one of my favorite parts of the holiday, and I couldn't wait to try Leia's version. Lee turned to me and said, If you want to eat, you have to help in the kitchen. Cooking was not my strong point, and after Lee led me into the kitchen, I told her so. But since we were alone, I came up from behind, pushed her blonde hair aside, and pressed my lips to her neck. Lee said, "If you don't stop, we'll have to wait longer to eat." I helped Lee get the large Dutch oven out of the refrigerator and put it in the oven. "This is strange-looking meat," I remarked. Lee replied, "It's called rib, or roasted pork belly. I cut the top layer of fat in a checkerboard pattern 2 days ago. Once cooked, the bottom of the meat is still tender and the crust on top is crispy." Lee handed me the peeler and pointed to the bag of potatoes. I didn't need any further instructions. While I was doing this, Lee was busy in the kitchen preparing the side dishes. She looked really happy, and we chatted, laughed, and told stories about Christmases past. As soon as we took rib out of the oven, the church bells started ringing. It was 17. "It's strange to hear bells at this time," I said. Lee replied, "In Scandinavia, the new day traditionally begins at sunset, not midnight. Following the old traditions, Christmas Day has arrived. It's time to eat." Joran joined us in the flurry of preparations. Places were set and food was moved from the kitchen to the dining room. On the table were rib, boiled potatoes, meatballs, sauce, sausages, sauerkraut, prunes, and lingonberries. Lee poured each of us a large glass of Øløl, a dark, spiced ale that is brewed at Christmas all over Norway. She said that at one time the Norwegian king made it illegal not to brew Christmas ale. Everything was delicious, and I ate until I couldn't take it anymore. After dinner, we cleaned up and moved into the living room to enjoy coffee, cookies, and a small bowl of risgrum. I was surprised that Lee took out 4 bowls of risgrum. 3 of them were topped with whipped cream and berry sauce, and one had just a pile of butter in the middle. Lee said, "Every Christmas we put out a bowl of porridge for the Afjørsnissen. The tradition comes from the times when farming families would offer porridge to their elf in the barn, or nis. The nis takes care of the animals in the barn in the winter so they don't get sick. If not, Afjørsnissen will be naughty." While we snacked, Joran carried a bowl of porridge out to the front door for Afjørsnissen. Then we sat and watched an American Christmas movie on TV. After it ended, Lee announced that it was time to open gifts. I suspected this would happen, and I was glad that I bought gifts for both Leia and Joran. We each went our separate ways and came back with our bags and put them under the Christmas tree. As expected, Lee and Joran gave each other the most gifts, opening the usual selection of chocolates, clothes, and kitchen items. Joran then gave me a gift from herself. I opened it and found a DVD labeled "Christmas in Norway" along with a link and instructions to download the video if I preferred. Joran said she made an hour-long video of everything we did together last week, adding music and voiceovers so I could remember this now completed tour. In very small letters at the bottom of the instructions, I saw a link to a story with a similar title and suspected it would be full of adjectives. Joran then opened my gift to her. Remembering the small camera she was using last week, I bought her a new advanced Sony digital camera. Judging by her reaction, the choice was successful. Lee then opened my gift to her. I bought a real Christmas star to hang in her window since she didn't have one. It was large and electrically lit, and after opening it, Lee wanted to hang it right away, so that's what we did. Then we went outside to see what she looked like. Lee kissed me and whispered that the Christmas star had special meaning for her this year, symbolizing the beginning of brighter days ahead. Seeing us standing outside, Julinnison walked across the street towards us. A man in a red jacket and a red pointed hat was carrying a cloth bag. He was older, and his white beard looked real. Joran shouted, "Good way, Julinnison." As Julinnison approached us, Lee said, "Nice to see you again, Mr. Bjornstad." Julinnison opened a small cloth bag, took out a straw goat decorated with red ribbons, and handed it to Joran. Lee explained that the Julinnisons go from house to house on Christmas Eve, handing out gifts and chocolates to children. Often there may be more than one Julinison knocking on your door. Unlike America, children in Norway can meet Julinison. This year wouldn't be the same without one of your Julebuckas, Joran said with delight. Mr. Pumpkin's Bornstad had been coming to Joran's house for a long time and said that he liked to preserve old Norwegian traditions, such as Julebuck. In addition to handing out handmade crafts, he told folklore stories and tales from the Viking era. How wonderful it is to preserve the ancient heritage of Norse sagas and stories. Lee apologized when Mr. Bornstad began to tell such a story to Joran and me. She returned a minute later with 4 glasses of aquavit. We drank the season and sipply aquavit together with Julinison after the end of the story. Then we sang a Christmas song together. Then we went back to the house and watched the DVD that Joran made. The tour turned out to be exciting and full of fun, which it really was. It also gave Lee another chance to see me in action. The evening was busy, and when the DVD finished at 11 p.m., we were all tired and it was time to go to bed. Joran told us she was going upstairs to take a shower. Lee and I followed her to our bedrooms. 5 minutes after we separated, there was a knock on my bedroom door. Opening the door, I saw Leia standing with one lit candle and dressed in a lavender silk nightgown and robe. The robe covered half of her nightgown, leaving her lace neckline and hem exposed. She put her finger to her lips and whispered, "SHHH." Then she led me by the hand into her bedroom. The only light in the room came from her one candle. My eyes quickly adjusted, or perhaps it was just my intentional. "You look incredible, look," Lee said quietly. "Joran gave me this set of lingerie last Christmas, hoping it would help me attract a man. What she doesn't understand is that it should only be worn when you find the right man. If you're ready, open your last Christmas present, pull the knot on my belt." In the semi-darkness, I pulled the end of her belt, and the knot slowly came undone. Leia's robe fell open, and as I looked at her, I took a deep breath. Wow! She grabbed the 2 sides of her robe and lifted them, making it look like she had wings. "You look like an angel," I whispered. "You are in Norway, Gunnar. I am Valkyrie. Don't Valkyries only appear when a brave warrior dies? Your old self dies tonight. It's time to let go of your fears, pain, and any remaining darkness in the past. Tonight, like a Valkyrie, I will carry you in my arms to Valhalla so you can become a new person. But don't I also need to be brave?" Lee reached out and touched my cheek. "Gunnar, you should already understand that giving unconditional love to another person, dedicating your life completely to him, is one of the bravest things you can do." I took a step towards Leia, and her Valkyrie wings wrapped around me. I smelled the soft scent of lavender on her skin. "I wish I could freeze time so I could stay here with you forever." Lee laughed. "That's impossible, Gunnar, because I would hug you and show you an act of true love, letting the fires of love in my heart melt the ice." I let go of Leia and stepped back to remove my shirt and boxers. I saw Lee take off her robe. We had sex. I moved higher so my lips could meet Leia's, and we kissed, looking into each other's eyes. "I love you, Lee. And I love you too, Gunnar." As I fell asleep in Lee's arms, my mind wandered. I knew that sex is not love and vice versa is also true. But there can be nothing better on earth than the physical and emotional combination of sex and love with someone you cherish. I felt so wonderful now. Maybe I'm not on earth anymore. Can a Valkyrie named Lee embrace me and carry me to Valhalla? Julinison told us that Odin feasted on roast boar and ale. At dinner, Lee served roast pork belly and Christmas ale. This must be a coincidence, right? Lee and I jumped when we heard a knock on the bedroom door. "Mom, can I come in?" I looked at Lee and asked, "Should I hide?" Lee looked at me and said, "I've spent every night for the last 3 years alone in this bed. Now that I finally have a man in it, I won't let you leave." Louder she shouted, "Come in, Joran." The door opened, and when Joran saw Leia and me in the same bed, she smiled. "Axel invited me over for Christmas breakfast with his family. Don't worry, I won't stay long. I want to spend the rest of the day with you and Gunnar. Lee asked interestingly, Date, Joran? Joran blushed and then replied, Well, maybe. After Joran left, Lee looked at me and said, After our sex last night, I want to take a shower this morning. Remembering what you said last night, I was wondering if you would like to. Well, smell the roses. I replied, In America, we open presents on Christmas morning. This is the best gift I ever received on Christmas. Although, there was one year when I received a Red Ryder BB rifle. Lee reached out to grab my shoulder, then rolled me over her until our lips met. After dinner, Lee, Joran, and I settled down on the sofa in the living room. We sat by the warm fireplace. The lights were off. Candles were burning. The Christmas tree was decorated, and I admired the new Christmas star in the window. We watched a Christmas movie on TV, talked and laughed. I said, I have almost 2 more weeks here in Norway, and I would like to see more. It is so beautiful here. Lee replied, Perhaps this time I can take you. There are still many places you have not seen, and much will be revealed to you. I replied, I would really like that. As the discussion slowed down, Joran stood up and said she was going to bed. Lee and I stayed together on the couch and snuggled closer to each other. Lee looked at me and said, Koselig. I didn't know this word. Right before our lips touched, she said, That means cozy. And it was cozy. When Lee and I returned home from our week-long trip, she found a letter from a lawyer in her mail informing her that her ex-husband had died of a heart attack in the fall. She called the law office to get more details and then told me. The lawyer told her that her ex-husband died while having sex with a married woman in her home while her husband was at work. The woman got scared and called her husband, who came and discovered the body. He immediately hired a lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. Due to unusual circumstances, police began an investigation. Lee's ex-husband was an alcoholic and obese. Police visited his small apartment but could not find any relatives, so the municipality followed its usual procedures, cremating his body and scattering his ashes. The court appointed an executor of the will to distribute his assets. The executor contacted his employer and at that time learned of a fairly large life insurance policy with the company that still listed Lee and Joran as beneficiaries. The performer kept a small box of personal items, but his other items were sold. Together with his bank accounts, they barely covered his debts after reimbursing the municipality for the cremation. Despite having a well-paying job, he died poor, with no one in his life who needed him or cared for him. Lee told the lawyer she didn't want any of his belongings and was pleased to learn that his ashes had been burned. The lawyer provided her with contact information for the insurance company. 3 months later, I called my lawyer and friend Roger, but the phone was transferred. I knew who would pick him up. Good morning, law offices of Miller and Mance. Hi, Jane. This is Gunnar Larson. Hi, Gunnar. Also, I need to transfer funds from these money markets to my new investment banker's account in Oslo. She suggested a financial plan where neither Lee nor I would have to work anymore. We'll miss you, Gunnar, and I'm sure you'll miss our Minnesota apple pies. I don't know, Jane. Lee makes a great apple pie filled with apples, cinnamon, and cardamom. I'll find the recipe and try to make it. I wish you a wonderful life, Gunnar. You deserve it. I'll tell Roger you called. Goodbye. Wonderful life. I am grateful to Joran for making my new life possible. I'm doing things I never dreamed of. Here in Norway, I can look at the sky, the mountains, the fjords, and into the eyes of the woman I love. I'm not afraid of anything anymore, although this may not be entirely true. Perhaps I should wait for the polar bear excursion to Svalbard to be sure. And subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.